Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar titled ADA Awareness, Critical Missteps to Catch in Design Phase, sponsored by Bobrick. I'm Robert Yeminen, Market Content Director of Architectural Products Magazine here at Endeavor Business Media, and I'm pleased to serve as moderator for this webinar. I just have a couple of quick housekeeping items to go over before I introduce today's speaker. First, let me explain how you can participate in today's presentation. If you have any technical difficulties during the session, please drop your question in the questions window, and one of our technical experts will be able to assist you. We also recommend disabling any pop-up blocking software or extensions in your browser, as these can cause some issues with the webinar player. Additionally, we welcome your questions during today's event, and we will answer as many questions as possible during the Q&A session that will follow the main presentation, but feel free to go ahead and send those questions in at any time during the session. To do so, simply type your questions into the Ask a Question window on the side of your screen and hit that Submit button. Also, please be aware that today's session is being recorded and will be available on the AP website within the next week for on-demand viewing, and you'll be notified by email when the archive is available. And now it's my pleasure to introduce today's speaker. Sean Hilgeman is a Senior Manager of Design Community Engagement at Bobrick. He's an architect based in the Northeast, specializing in bridging the gap between designers and product manufacturers. With experience in design firms dating back to 1999, including serving as an owner and partner in 2 practices, he understands both the needs of architects and what it takes for a product to become the basis of design. Working on behalf of leading manufacturers, Sean has developed tools and product information systems that help architects make informed decisions, build trust, and create mutually beneficial relationships between design firms and manufacturers. His approach is rooted in long-term consultative engagement with a strong emphasis on ethical service. With that, I'll turn things over to you, Sean.
All right. Thanks very much, Rob. Well, hello, everybody. Thank you for joining today. Just to give you a background on the presentation, it is derived from our planning guide for accessible restrooms. This is, I think it's included as a download from this presentation, but you can also download it directly from the website. It was written by a gentleman by the name of Alan Gettleman. Alan is a member of the ICC Standards Committee, so he's actually involved in the development of these standards. So this is really from the source. It's not going to be jurisdictionally specific, but we can get down to that granular level of detail in the Q&A, probably in follow-up after the presentation. So. And again, it is downloadable as a resource. And with that, I will jump right in. Copyright Bobrick. So the description, restroom spaces are common areas of focus in the ADA lawsuits. Many of you may have encountered this, where there are individuals who have a lawyer on speed dial and a tape measure, and they catch these issues. And we see a lot of this. We see a lot of change orders. And just to give you a heads up, we're going to share some of these that are the most common that we encounter in the field. They're really pitfalls that can be caught in the design phase. Okay. So just to start, we do get a lot of questions about the different codes and standards. And to clarify that, today's presentation deals only with public restrooms. We're not going to go into residential, multifamily, no Fair Housing Act, public restrooms only, because there's plenty of information just in this topic. So to start, many of you are very familiar with the IBC shown on the bottom right there, that blue document. That is a scoping document. That is really where it all starts for the designer. By scoping, I mean what, where, and how many, as far as requirements for accessibility. So that's, and the IBC is an ICC, International Code Council publication. So it is going to refer to the ICC A117.1, which I'll also say ANSI 117.1. That's what the A stands for. It essentially refers out to the A117.1 as for technical requirements. So your IBC is your scoping document, what, where, and how many. And then the A117.1 is how high, your dimensions. And that's they complement each other. So that's the way these two documents work. They're both publications of the International Code Council. So then you have two versions of the A117.1. You have 2009 and you have 2017. Which one do you utilize? In order to find out, you go to the IBC, your scoping document for the jurisdiction that your project is in. And you go to chapter 35 of that jurisdiction's version of the IBC, and they will tell you which version of the A117.1 that they are utilizing. So again, that is the relationship there. And then you have the 2010 ADA standards. The 2010 ADA standards were published by the Department of Justice. They are basically this. So the ADA Act of 1990 utilizes the 2010 ADA standards as their enforceable requirements. So it is law. And to note is that the 2010 ADA standards are intended to set the minimum requirements for every public restroom in the country. They did grow up alongside the 2009 A117.1. A117.1 is a little bit more stringent. So technically, if you follow that, you will be automatically meeting the requirements of 2010 ADA standards. So that's basically an overview of the how these all interact and what they mean. So one slight difference that this is important that you'll notice between there's a couple very slight differences between the 2009 ANSI and 2010 ADA standards. There's significant differences in the 2017 version of ANSI because it's significantly more stringent. But the vertical grab bar in your ADA stall is something that it exists in the 2009 ANSI, but it does not exist in the 2010 ADA standards. What that means is if you fail to utilize the vertical grab bar, that is a code violation. It is not a potential civil rights lawsuit. So that's an important distinction. And we'll talk about that as we go through other slides. All right. So this slide has a fair amount of information in it. Just to start, it is a high volume restroom. What defines it as a high volume restroom is that there's 6 fixtures or more, and that can be 3 urinals and 3 toilets. I believe this has, I think 11 or 12, but once it hits that 6 fixture threshold, 2 things are required. The first is that an ambulatory stall, which you can see adjacent to the ADA stall on the left side, is required. And many of you already know what that is. But the ambulatory stall is a requirement in a high volume restroom. You have to have at least one. The other, this is a very commonly missed requirement. It is something called enhanced reach ranges. And we'll look at this a little closer in an upcoming slide. But once you have a high volume restroom, most jurisdictions require enhanced reach ranges. The primary requirement that you're going to see there is that at least one lav needs to have the ability to turn water on and off and wash the hands within 11 inches from the front edge of the countertop. And we'll look at that again more closely in a moment. Another note on this slide is that you'll notice that for the most part, it is mirrored. If you have the luxury of this large of a restroom, what happens here is a high volume restroom is going to have a higher variety of disabilities entering and using it. And you can't assume that all of them are going to be accommodated by just a right hand or just a left hand approach. So by mirroring the restroom, you're actually creating a right hand and a left hand approach to everything in the room. So that is an important note. The one other item I'll note is the changing station you see on the right side there. Changing stations are not required in most jurisdictions, but because of that, they often get tucked into a corner or placed somewhere convenient. But they don't always show the wheelchair clear floor space. And what happens is that if someone using a wheelchair is utilizing the changing station, it blocks the required circulation through the room. So in this case, you can see on the changing station, if a chair is parked there and then another chair is parked at the same time at the hand dryer, you still have your 36-inch clear floor path. So this does happen more often than you'd think, and it's just something to be aware of, making sure you're showing that wheelchair clear floor space on that particular accessory. Okay, so this is a little bit of a heads up. This slide is talking about the maximum mounting height of the manually operable portion of accessories. And you're going to see in our guide, as well as the standards themselves, this note about 44-48. And it's a little bit misleading because it infers, at a glance, that the manually operable portion of an accessory needs to be set in that 4-inch band between 44 and 48 inches. And that's not what it means. For a forward approach, it's going to be either 48 or 44, depending on the situation. And there is a rule of thumb to simplify this because it does get complicated. So the rule of thumb is 100% of the time, your max mounting height for the manually operable portion of an accessory will be 48 inches unless there's an obstruction beneath it. If there's an obstruction beneath it, you have to go in and do more homework. And I'll dig into that as well in an upcoming slide. Okay. And this is where we will dig into it. We're also going to talk about the enhanced reach ranges here. So on the top left, you can see that is meeting the requirement for enhanced reach ranges. So you might see this occasionally and wonder why it's there. And this is the reason. The sections, I have the sections there for New York State, New York City, 1109.2.3. It should be similar in most jurisdictions, but you can always reach out and we can find the correct chapter and verse for you. So the important note here is you're setting now your accessory height that we just talked about, and you find that there is an obstruction beneath your accessory. So there's a series of questions that you have to ask, and this is not anything you have to memorize, but as you go back and refresh on it, this will ring a bell. So you have an obstruction beneath your accessory. And the first thing you have to ask is, does this restroom have enhanced reach ranges? If no, you can drop it down to 44. That's for your forward approach. If yes, then you have to then ask if you're dealing with a hand dryer or a paper towel dispenser. If the answer is still yes, now you come to this chart that's on the bottom left here, and you can see it's very particular. If you, on the first column there, you can see if you have an obstruction 1/2 inch or larger, which could be 3/4 inch base molding, you actually are required to drop it by 2 inches. That goes from 48 to 46 inches. So the important note is that this is a code violation. It does not appear in the 2010 ADA standards. So it is a code violation. It's not a potential civil rights lawsuit. Okay. So this is low-hanging fruit for getting stung. And the reason is, so you've got we actually have had people waiting at ribbon cutting ceremonies. They go right to the restroom. They go right to the sinks. And the reason is you have a 34-inch maximum height above the finished floor for that counter. And in restrooms, you have sometimes uneven tile. You may have the pour beneath the tile was uneven. You have slopes for floor drains. So there can be a lot of variation. And unless someone has gone through and measured each location to ensure at least one of them is 34 inches maximum, that can be a violation. And this isn't 2010 ADA, so it can be potentially a civil rights lawsuit. So the other thing to be aware of here is that you may have specified an undermount sink, and 2 years later, the owner switches them out to top mount sinks. That measurement is now to the top of the ceramic. And that's another area where you can get stung. So I do share how other offices deal with this. And across the board, the best way to defend against these is to not be pulled into the dispute at all, utilizing office standards. So one office standard you can follow here is to set all of your countertop heights at 33.5 inches to build in tolerance for either undulations in the floor or if you have that top mount sink. So this is a very common issue, actually, that compromises both ADA and your initial design intent. So over here on the left, you have an ADA, assuming there's an ADA, your ADA sink is on the far right there, and everything is compliant. However, a lot of maintenance groups do not like using the C-fold towels. And what happens is one of these plastic roll towel units gets glued right on top of it. So, one option is just being aware of this. You can specify from the beginning an auto roll towel that is not going to get swapped out at a later date. Okay, so now you guys are very familiar with this diagram here on the top right, I'm sure. This is your knee and toe clearance. And the important note here is that this very often appears on drawing sets. And it's important to remember that this diagram alone will not protect you in a lawsuit. And the reason is because there is no contractor that's going to be able to open all the boxes of, the trap, the sink, the faucet, and be able to ensure that they meet all of the maximums and minimums required by this diagram. It's just not possible. The only way to do that is to actually draw the section with the products being used. And that's an example where you ensure that your products are being used are compliant dimensionally. You can put them into your box of office standards. If you change it later, vet it again, version B, and you can reuse those on other projects. Okay, so this is worth memorizing. Anything that needs to be manually operable in an accessible space, and this very often applies to like your door levers, but also to your accessories. It has to be done so without tight grasping, pinching, twisting of the wrist, and less than 5 pounds of pressure. The accessory shown here is a red flag accessory because and this goes into another topic. There are a lot of manufacturers who have these accessories that are not ADA compliant, yet they claim. So, and this is really, really important to remember. The manufacturers have these claims all over on their websites, on their cut sheets, and there is no individual, there's no organization that reviews and vets and gives them permission to use that claim. The first line of defense is, and the person who's actually taking like personal liability is the architect signing and sealing the drawings. And that's really important because I feel it's unfair, but it is the way the industry is right now. The person signing and sealing, the architectural firm, has to do due diligence on behalf of the manufacturers to make sure that these are code compliant, are ADA compliant, and that their claim is correct. There's a little image of a transfer shower there. That's another red flag item because the 36 by 36 is often claimed to be the prefab bases are claimed to be ADA compliant, but when the finishes are added, they're not. So that is definitely one. And I've had a number of firms shaking their heads. Yes, we're ripping those out right now for that reason. Okay. This is another important slide. So you are probably familiar with the maximum protrusion into an accessible path of 4 inches. What's important to note is that from 27 inches down, that is not a requirement because it's considered detectable by a cane, and above 80 inches is okay. Now, this is another one where we have an architect right now ripping out partitions for this reason. So when you are specifying a full height partition to the ceiling, each compartment needs to have a sprinkler, HVAC, and light. So in order to get away from that requirement, you need to drop the top of the partitions 18 inches below the deflector of the sprinkler, which is often 20 inches below the ceiling height. So what happens there is if your partition system has a headrail, in many cases, that headrail, your clear opening as you go into the stall, is below 80 inches. And this is potentially a civil rights lawsuit because someone with a visual disability is not required to use a separate ADA stall. They can go into any stall. So you do want to make sure that what partition system you utilize in those cases does not have a headrail. And we have plenty of options for that. Just want to make sure you do your due diligence, and we're always happy to support on choosing the right system there. All right, so these, I'm not going to read all these different dimensions to you. They're always there for reference, but two things I'll draw your attention to on this slide. This is the smallest possible ADA stall you can design, and the excuse me, the important note is that the toilet has to be diagonally opposite the two doors. And the reason is because the individual is intended to transfer on and off the toilet. It cannot be aligned with the toilet. So, and that does happen very often. This is a really good one. So this is that smallest possible ADA stall we just looked at. From the inside face outward, you are required to have a minimum of 6 inches clearance. You're allowed to have support pieces for the stall itself, but you can't have any like building obstructions or any other obstructions in that area. If you want your partition to go all the way to the floor, you can do that by growing the stalls and to absorb that toe gap inside the stall itself. And that's important. You can see the toe gap on the right side. Adults are 9 inches, children are 12 inches because their seat height is the same as adults, so their feet come down a little lower. Important, many firms use a rule of thumb of 60 by 60 for their ADA stall. That is a dangerous rule of thumb, and I'm going to explain why right now. Your ADA stall that you're looking at here typically is set against, at the end of the run of stalls, against a solid wall. On the side that you see on the left side of the stall there, if you do a 60 by 60 stall right up against a solid wall, you will not have the toe gap. And this is a civil rights requirement. So the only way, this is the largest change order I've seen in a restroom, and it's a really big red flag. So the only way to fix this, because you can't really cut a toe gap into a solid wall, is to move the toilet over 6 inches, then the next toilet, the next toilet, the next toilet, all the way down to what may or may not be the entrance to the restroom. Now your fixture count is off, the whole restroom's being redesigned. So this is a really good one to be aware of early in design. 66 by 66 is a good rule of thumb for 2009 A117.1. 2017 has grown to from 6 to 8 inch requirement for that toe gap. So a 68 by 68 is a better rule of thumb for 2017. This is also to highlight because 2017 has, for all, whether children or adults, they have a 12-inch toe gap, right? When everyone's asking for more privacy, you have this huge toe gap. So everyone is, or I'm going to say, a lot of designs are enlarging that stall so they can gain more privacy underneath, whether going all the way to the floor or reducing it to a few inches. So in those cases, you do have to grow the stall to 68 by 68. This is a nuance about grab bars. So grab bars, when you're designing and you are drawing that grab bar and setting its height in your elevation view, that height is set to the top of the grab bar. However, that exact same grab bar viewed in plan, you're now locating it left and right in plan. It's actually located relative to the center line. So the return, the escutcheons, so it's located using two different positions depending on the view. Okay. So this is one of the charts that we provided for download. It's also available on the website. On the left side are a lot of design elements. On the first column to the right of that is the 2010 ADA, which, as you remember, is almost identical to the 2009 ANSI. That's two columns over to the right. Directly next to the 2009 ANSI is the 2017, so you can really see the differences between 2009 and 2017 there. The second column has Texas, the far right has California. There's a lot of unusual requirements in different states, and we're always happy to help as needed with tracking down those requirements. This is just an image of some Thrislington installs. Important note, the Thrislington is the one partition type that we use that is more like millwork in that it's fully customizable, as opposed to trying to understand different standard parts and pieces of your other partition systems. We do have a new showroom in New York City at 200 Lexington Avenue on the 14th floor. Please come visit anytime, grab a coffee. And that's where I'm going to leave the presentation, and happy to answer any questions. Oh, if anyone would like a CEU, we do provide those in office.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Sean, for that incredibly informative presentation. We'll now be transitioning over to the Q&A portion of today's webinar, and it looks like we have a few questions already, so we'll jump right in. For our attendees, if you do have a question for Sean, go ahead and type your question into the question window on the side of your screen and hit that submit button. We'll get to as many questions as we can in the time remaining. For those that we can't answer, not to worry, Sean will answer those via email after the presentation. So real quickly here, Sean, is ADA 2010 technically a law?
Yes. Well, it's not technically a law in and of itself. The ADA Act of 1990 is the law, and that act utilizes 2010 ADA standards as its reference. So it's connected to the law. I guess you could say it's part of the law.
Got it. Okay. And I think you answered this already. If you provide AIA approved CEU on this content, it sounded like you did.
Yes, AIA CEU as well as IDCEC. We do the lunch and learns.
Okay, perfect. All right, another question for you here. When is the side-mounted faucet at soap at 11 inches required in a restroom? Is it for all?
No, that would be for your high volume restrooms only. And so as soon as you have 6 fixtures or more, toilet fixtures, then that triggers the requirement for the ambulatory stall and for enhanced reach ranges in most jurisdictions. But what's interesting is that, so New York, for example, 1109.2.3 is the one sentence that says in these high volume restrooms, you need enhanced reach ranges. And then you go over to A117.1 and it sets the, what requirements there are for enhanced reach ranges. New Jersey, right across the river, deleted that one sentence. So technically the scoping document is saying it's not required, even though the technical requirements will still appear in A117.1. So you do want to carefully check the current IBC of the jurisdiction your project is in, but most of them do. And frankly, it's better to include one anyway. They're useful not just to people with disabilities. They're useful to everyone. So yeah.
Great. Okay, thanks. I think we might have time for one or two more here real quick. So regarding the toe gap at the toilet stall, the comment says, I thought code says the toe gap can be on either side of the stall. So can you clarify that, Sean?
It has to be on just like the door, it has to be on the two sides opposite the toilet. And again, that is related to the need for the disabled occupant to maneuver and transfer on and off the toilet from their chair.
Gotcha. Okay, I think we have time for one more here. Do wall-hung toilets help solve accessibility issues in toilet compartments?
That's a great question. They don't help solve accessibility issues, but they do help solve dimensional issues because you have a lot of times these restrooms are very, very tight. It's very hard to fit these requirements, these spatial requirements into them. So when you have a wall mount toilet, that ADA stall that we looked at earlier can tighten up by 3 inches. The maximum, I mean, the minimum depth for a wall hung toilet is 56 inches. The drain is inside the wall. For a floor mounted toilet, that brings the drain outside of the wall, and now the minimum depth is 59 inches. So that's a great question.
Yeah. Okay, great. I wish we could answer more, but unfortunately, we've run out of time for today. For those of you that did submit questions that we didn't have time to answer live, not to worry. We'll be getting back to you via email with a thorough response to your questions from Sean. So that concludes today's presentation. On behalf of Architectural Products, I'd like to thank Bobrick for sponsoring today's event. And of course, to all of you for joining us. Have a great rest of your day.